If we don't take care of our elders, we're not going to survive. It's just as simple as that. A community, a people, a tribe. They always had elders. They had elders. And you see the Native Americans as well. They had elders and they were well respected. And when things and important decisions had to be made, they consulted the elders, you know. They had a circle and they had a discussion and they figured out what they were going to do, what the best course of action is. You know, on my travels, everywhere that I've been, elders were pretty much the cornerstone of the community. And people, the young people would go to consult the elders, you know, and they just, when they were stuck, not knowing what to do, you know, you go to the old man or the old woman, and they were kind of like, you know, that, you know, just, I guess, wealth of wisdom, for lack of better words. And I think that a culture that does not respect their elders can't survive. Why is that? Well, I mean, you don't want to make the same mistakes over and over again as a community because you don't know your past, right? But I suspect that's deliberate here in the United States. I suspect that is a deliberate thing. So to, you know, keep the common folk from becoming united. Because if they're united, then they're hard to manipulate. You know, they're hard to take advantage of. They're hard to exploit. And it's about exploiting your wealth. Do you talk to your neighbor? Right? Do you talk to the old man down the street? Do you make sure that he's okay? You know, at least up in here. You do that. I see so many old people who are just left alone. I had a neighbor, her name was Rose. She was in her 70s. She lived right across the street, you know, and my wife made it a point to keep communication with her. And they would always go for coffee. They'd go, you know, for a soda, and they'd have a chat. And when I was back in the States at the time, because I would work, you know, a rotation overseas. And, you know, we'd always make it a point to get together and have a good chat. Wonderful. And good days. Well, she lived alone. And she passed away alone. And it took some of us to really raise the alarm and say, look, what's going on with Rose? She's not answering her phone calls. You know? And me and my wife left town. I remember we left town for a little while. And then when we got back, you know, the grass was grown a little bit and things just looked out of place. And us and this other individual were trying to, you know, get the authorities involved. You know, she had passed away alone. Yeah, it's heartbreaking in a big way. We have to make it a point to consult our elders, at least individually, at least yourself. You have to make it a point to talk to them, to make sure they're okay. And if we need to know things, we consult them, right? Because they have a wealth of knowledge and wisdom to impart on us. That's why they're there, to guide society. That was the elders' job before, to guide the tribe. You know, those seasons of wisdom, they've been through it. They've probably been through similar weather. And that's why you keep them around. So you don't make the same mistakes over and over and over again. Right? I remember other cultures. I remember visiting Macedonia years ago. And it was common for a family to have a book, a family book of each individual would write something in that family book, and things that they wish and hope for future generations of the family, and what for that family is the important things and aspects of wisdom to carry on. And it's quite profound, because we don't have things like that here in the United States. We could, but we don't, because we don't care about our older people, do we? A lot of people just lock them up in hospitals, halfway houses, these kinds of things, and just keep them away and say, well, you know, they're old. What do they know, the old fools? No, they know a lot, you know. They know a lot. They've been through that. A lot of times they're telling you not to do something because they've done it before. They know. But we don't think that they're important. A people that don't value their elders are doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again, which will ultimately lead to their downfall. And historically and categorically, that's been the case. We don't value our elders. It's incredible, you know. It's unfortunate that here in the United States, we're in a state where old people aren't looked at. Old people aren't even seen, let alone looked at. You know, you have to see them first. They have to be out about. But they're probably in vehicles. They're probably staying out of the sun, the weather, and so on. How many times during the course of the day here in the United States do you see old people? Very few. I remember hauling military equipment when I was stationed in Europe. So we'd haul equipment from different location to location. And then we were going to Madrid, Spain. And so to get to Madrid, Spain from Germany, you have to go through France, of course. You know, Strasbourg, France was kind of like the gateway. But I remember at this town out in the country, we stopped and we stayed the night. You know, and I remember during that afternoon, after like 8 hours, or I think 11 hours of driving, we have to stop, you know. It was a NATO directive. We had to stop and, you know, sleep. Because they weren't sleepers, they were day cabs, 1628 Mercedes-Benz. So we stopped off in Europe. And there were old people all around, and this was in France. This was in the countryside of France, going through France to get to the Iberian Peninsula, to get to Madrid, Spain, and they also had a place in Barcelona. And I just thought it was very interesting that there were old people downtown in this town. And I remember seeing this in the Black Forest as well when I was driving through the Black Forest in Germany. And I went to this town, this beautiful town with these, you know, Germanic house cottages and stuff like that. It was a very beautiful town. I forget what the name of it is. But you see old people in Europe, a lot of them. And in France, there were they were smoking. They were smoking cigarettes or cigars or pipes, whatever their choice of tobacco was. And they were drinking cognac and wine and stuff, out there in the park. And I thought that was pretty profound. I was like, wow, they're doing all these things that are bad habits, and they're old. And I remember he was a German soldier, and he says, yeah, but you Americans are different, and your food isn't as good. And in Germany, he's like, in Germany, we have something called for example, that's how they talk. For example, we have the German Food Purity Act, and a lot of the food that you have in the United States cannot be even possessed or even sold here, in Europe, because it's bad. It's very bad for you. It's unfortunate that you guys have a lot of processed foods, because he for a time was stationed in the United States in the German Air Force, and he said how toxic the food was and how sick he got, and and he said he loved the United States. The only thing is, it's legal to poison their citizens with bad food, processed food, and it ultimately makes you sick, right? So a lot of Americans don't have access to good food. I think that needs to change, and it's destroying our elders. It's taking away the health of our elders, our old people, and that's a shame. It's terrible. And many young people don't have access to good food. That's terrible as well, because there's a lot of sickness, and now you see a lot of people not being able to afford to eat, and yet we're the richest country in the world, supposedly. Elders are important. I value our elders. I value my elders. Now, I didn't always. But seeing all these different countries, going all these different countries, makes me have a better perspective on the importance of valuing our elder population. We see this throughout history, and even anthropologists, when these archaeologists, dig up all these ancient sites and these bones, they can tell that the elders were taken care of, especially when they weren't healthy enough to hunt and forage for themselves. Some of them were missing limbs. Some of them were very disabled, but yet they found that these wounds were healed, and these people had food, adequate food, and they were provided care by their youth, because their value was so high, because they've been through all the seasons and hunting seasons, and they were consulted when there were problems that arised in their community, in their tribe. It's very important that we take care of our elders. It's very important that we regard our elders and the knowledge that they have and the mistakes that they've made throughout their lives, that we don't repeat them. But yet, here we are. Our ignorance is being monetized. These billionaires are monetizing our ignorance, and it's through our ignorance they're able to manipulate us. They're able to, to take advantage of us, our ignorance, and to exploit us in a way that everything about us is monetized. You have to think really deeply and critically, because we lack those critical thinking skills that we utilize throughout millennia and millennia as a people that have gotten us here from hundreds of thousands of years ago. Here we are. But yet, we don't respect ourselves. If we don't respect our elders, we don't really respect ourselves. And we're not really regarding our future either, because we're going to be in the same place as they are now. And we have to understand that. We have to make sure we understand that they are a reflection of us, and we are a reflection of them. And that we need to keep their brains going as well as they need to keep our mind going. It's when we have that relationship, we are a very strong people. You see very strong communities because their elders are the chieftains. And if they're not the chieftains, they're at the round table. At least they're at the campfire, huddled in a circle, critically thinking about what they need to do and what the best course of action is for the hunt to come, or that tribe that is threatening their livelihood. That's who we used to be. We are a tribal people, guys. We are tribal at our very core. We're a people without a tribe. If we're a people without a tribe, we're a people without knowledge. We're a people without wisdom. We are a people without strength. We're a people without integrity. And ultimately and truthfully, we are people that are doomed to fall. Elders are important. And they've never been important as much as they are now. But paradoxically, that we are needing of our elders now. In the same light, we throw them away. We lock them away in closets, in medical facilities. These halfway houses, 1 foot in the grave. And we forget about them. We don't visit them. We leave them to the care of other people. And we're just waiting for them to pass away so we can take advantage of the fruits of their labors for years and years and what they have to leave behind, but yet we dishonor them. If we dishonor our elders, we dishonor ourselves, and we dishonor each other, and we dishonor the rest of the world. And then we don't have the strength enough to carry on. I don't care what a lot of people say. A lot of people, they want to conjure up this boogeyman of the Russians and the Chinese. The only thing that keeps them together is that they respect more their elders than we do. So what does that say about us? How can we point the finger at other cultures that respect their elders, but we don't respect our elders? But yet we point the finger and say, oh, they're a problem, right? And it's the truth. They're the problem? No. No, we have an enemy, and it's ourselves. We elect these politicians that don't care about us, that never cared about us to begin with. And then we put such great emphasis and hope in them solving our problems, lest we solve our own. And we're the only people that can really solve our own problems. And greed has swept the land in such a big way. There's so much greed out there. And there's too much greed out there. And it's ultimately going to be our undoing. Because it's a zero-sum game. And these bigs, what I mean by that, are the big four, the 7 families, the 12 international families, that control a large swath of the wealth and the people in their inner circle, which are very many, but very few compared to the population of the earth. And it's amazing that they have such a stranglehold on every corner in every facet of your life. But yet, you give them that ability, and they pass that law that restricts you from taking care of yourself. right? But we're very fractured and we're not a community, we're not a tribe. And if they split us and that we're so at odds with each other, well, that they're able to manipulate us more, aren't they? They're able to take advantage of us more because we can't get together on a single thing. So we're all each an individual man for himself. It's every man for himself. You've heard that line before, but that can't ring true, more true than it is today. They can't afford you to be a community. They can't afford you to be a tribe. Because if you are a tribe, if you are a community, then it is power. And that's empowerment. That you have a people that can get together and form a phalanx and say, no, we're not going to have any of this. And you don't have to be violent. No. Violence, look at the people that you're dealing with. They're violent. The government's violent. They control the violence because they threaten you, don't they? They threaten you with all kinds of things that you don't even know that you're causing an infraction, a legal infraction. And they say, well, if you do that, we're gonna, take you. We're gonna put you on the ground, face first in the dirt or the tarmac and arrest you and put handcuffs on you and restrict the blood circulation to your hands so you can't even feel your fingers. And if you resist, we're gonna make it worse and physically harm you and subdue you, right? Because they control the violence. The government controls the violence. And these big corporations control the violence because they control the government. And it's all against you. I hear so many people say that, these are the times of the tribulation because there's a famine. We have a famine here in the United States. I don't think so. I don't think that is because we have more food than we know what to do with. The only difference is that food that's not sold is usually thrown in the dumpster. And yet we have all these starving children and these elderly people that can't even, rub 2 nickels together to feed themselves. What kind of a society are we that we allow this to happen? I wouldn't have dreamed it in a million years when I raised my right hand and I pledged that oath to protect and serve the Constitution of the United States, that this was going to be the end result, that I was going to spend many years going to combat deployments to protect our freedoms, and then come back to the United States 5 years ago, finally, after many years of being overseas, and then see the state of how restricted we are as a people, and how we allowed these corporate entities and the corporation government to restrict our freedom and movement and things like that. So willingly you lay down and say, well, it's the government. They have our best interest at heart. But when you wake up the next decade, you see that your freedoms are restricted that much more. How long are you going to let this happen? How long is this going to go on before, you don't have anywhere to go to be at peace and be by yourself and be able to walk in the nature and be able to live up in the mountains, because now you're in a 15-minute city, a smart city, and you resigned yourself to taking the mark. They're already talking about all these computer chips and stuff like that, and digital, I don't know, computer chips in your skin being one with the digital world. I remember seeing years back the Borg and Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm not going to be a part of the Borg, because that's exactly what it is. You're resigning yourself to being part of the Borg if you combine yourself with the digital age and computers and computer technology and having a computer chip in your head or underneath your skin. I don't think it's going to stop there either. Having a scannable, I think Bill Gates was talking about a scannable barcode tattooed to your skin. I never got a tattoo. I never will get a tattoo. I will never get a tattoo. And I can't buy or sell. Well, it's too bad. I'm not going that route. I'll just go off into the woods and go forage and hunt and live that way and let nature take its course. All because we don't want to honor our elders. All because we don't want to consult our elders. But the billionaire class does. That's why they're there. Because their elders provided them with generational wealth. And their lives are so opulently wealthy. It's a stark contrast to the normal folk. And they have no ability to understand or even care about you. But yet you elected somebody in office that has lived the opulent life ever since they were born. And you expect them to understand you, to understand what it is to be a normal and regular human being in this country, and to be middle class. He doesn't care anything about you. He doesn't care about any of your problems. Why? Because it's like a Fermi paradox. He doesn't communicate with you because he doesn't think along your level. You don't think along his. It's a different language of thought. And yet you think he's supposed to solve all your problems and all your issues. And you think that you guys are powerless to, really stand and confront it and say, no, we're not doing it as a whole, as a people. And if you were able to do that, if you were able to come together, none of this would have ever happened. Because you wouldn't allow it. You would have the power to prevent it. And they would be at your mercy because they are. The only reason why they have the power that they have is because you acquiesce to it. You say, okay, I need what you have. Us as a people, we need what you have, so we're going to give you the power that you want. We're going to give you the energy that we work so hard for to get what you are gatekeeping, because we need it in this synthetic reality, in the synthetic society. We need to come together as a tribe. We need to have communities for one common purpose and goal. We need to stop letting them take control of us. And we need to honor and respect our elders. A community, a society, even a tribe way back in the day could never survive had not for the knowledge and wisdom of their elders. That's what kept them going. That's what kept them, alive. And we are the result of that. And that is testament. That is the truth. But we don't want to see that. We don't want to recognize that. And that's unfortunate. I hope you have a good day. Go talk to an elder. Go consult your elders. Go ask them how they're doing. Help your elders. Do something. Give yourself and help your elders. Help them clean their house. Whatever. Help them buy some food. We need a symbiotic relationship with our elders. Otherwise, we as a society will fail. Have a good day.